Matty freaking Fitzpatrick, U.S. Open champion from this past weekend. Of course, it does require one of our favorites, Will Zalatoris, to not get the job done. But hey, the consolation prize is Matt Fitzpatrick, hashtag Go Cats, being a major champion. It is a great week to talk about some golf, a great week to celebrate the PGA Tour and get you set for some PGA DFS for this week. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gadula. He is the senior managing editor of numberFire.com. Brandon, Matt Fitzpatrick, not Matthew. Matt is the one who won the major, so I feel like we need to rescind our criticism of his changing his name. How are you doing today?
I think you've been a little harsher on that than I have.
Okay, so we as I need to retract my, because he was a never again at one point until he changed his name back to Matthew. And, eventually he did round into form. I used him in DFS, but he was, it was a controversial move on his part.
I think it's safe to say that it paid off for him. I think that was also the biggest change for him, not adding a bunch of clubhead speed and distance. Definitely not anything like that. Just the name change, and it took a while. So maybe we need like a William Zalatoris or like a
Willie.
Bill Zalatoris is a completely different person.
No, I don't like that.
No.
Willie or Billy are the two options for him.
Will's so right for him. We both had him as win picks at the end of the show. Obviously, more action than just a recommendation on Zalatoris. And, honestly, with the leaderboard being as good as it was with Scheffler and, I'm not going to name everyone, but I was like, if it's not going to be Zalatoris, I kind of want it to be Fitzpatrick. So, yeah. At least I got that.
Yeah. And pretty likable guy. That's always fun. Honestly, most people at the top right now, currently on the PGA Tour, still on the PGA Tour, pretty likable. So I think that's a plus as well. So Matty Fitz making us both happy here, even though I did not have a lot of him in DFS. So, bummer from that perspective. But kudos to him. And now we spin things forward to the Travelers Championship. And you'd think, given that there was a big event before the U.S. Open and then there was the U.S. Open, you'd think this field would kind of lag. And it's not the deepest field, but there are some really good names in this field for this week. So still a really good event from a DFS perspective. We're going to break down who we're targeting for this week on FanDuel and much more to get you set for the Travelers Championship. But first, a quick reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. We, of course, are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, you name it, you can find us there. MLB DFS podcast every weekday. We, of course, have UFC and NASCAR covered as well, all in the same place. So hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review. Also, sports fans, there's no better time than today to sign up for FanDuel Fantasy. For users who have yet to make a deposit on FanDuel Fantasy, you can deposit today to receive 2 free entries. All you have to do is deposit a minimum of $10 into your FanDuel DFS account, and you will be instantly rewarded with 2 free vouchers. This is a limited time offer, so be sure to deposit now and play for free. Head to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Fantasy app today. Eligibility restrictions apply. Go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app for more details. The Travelers Championship, as always, is held at TPC River Highlands. It is 6,852 yards, again, 6,852, the yardage for the course. It is a par 70 as well. There are 156 golfers in the field. The top 65 plus ties will make the cut after the first 2 rounds. Brandon, they've been coming to TPC River Highlands for a very long time. We know what to expect. So you tell me, what should we expect this week?
I know what we should expect. But,
again, we're shifting this from a we to a you. It was a we to an I before. It's a we to a you now.
But if anyone maybe
for those listening who may not know what basic concept that I should know is, tell me about it. For those listening,
I got you covered. We got you covered. We're a we on this show. Everything we do is together. Never any arguments.
Hold that thought. You might not want to commit to that fully.
But yeah, as you mentioned, in the 6,800 yard range, so basically the shortest course we get on the PGA Tour for all intents and purposes. And So that does sort of change things a bit, but quickly, I'm going to say that I kind of need to make a note on iron play because it's less important at TPC River Highlands than it is at your average PGA Tour course. I will bump it down a little bit, but it is still the most important stat of the week. It will always be the most important stat. It just is always going to be. If anyone has any questions, you can just tweet at me at Gadula13, and I'll be glad to explain why that matters. But it's not just iron play this week, but it still is number one. Now, despite average width fairways, missing fairways is really, really penal at this course. And so, according to Data Golf, this is like one of the courses where you do not want to miss the fairway because it's gonna hurt you. It's gonna show up in the scorecard. So driving accuracy is going to be a little bit more important this week. And historically, strokes gained off the tee has mattered. Strokes gained off the tee then is a key stat for me with an emphasis on driving accuracy. I kind of want to be done saying driving accuracy itself is a key stat. It's more, do you gain strokes off the tee and have some accuracy? If so, then that's kind of what I'm looking for this week. We also see a pretty heavy emphasis on strokes gained putting at this course. These greens, once again, a bit small relative to the PGA Tour, averaging around 5,000 square feet. The average on the PGA Tour is around 6,000 square feet, so about 85% there. And while I'm talking about the greens, they're bent grass and POA combined. So I'm not really looking at any specific splits. You can look at some bent grass plus POA if you want to do that. One name does jump to mind that I noticed who's been really weak on Bermuda, but good on bent grass and POA lately. I'll talk about him later. He is he's maybe a FanDuel fan, let's say. Maybe his name is Jordan Spieth, let's say. But I'm not necessarily looking too deep at the splits for putting. I think it's a little bit more of an overall sort of look this week at just strokes gained putting ability. And as far as scoring goes, I mean, last week we saw a really difficult test, but the winners have been around 15 under. 3 of the past 5 were at least 17 under, but 2 of those won by at least 3 shots. So you could have won, close to 15 under. So we're not looking at like 20, 25 under, but around 15 under. So a little bit easier. And that does, I think maybe that's something I need to do a better job looking into, is looking at golfers who do play their better golf whenever it is more of a birdie fest. We have a few anecdotal options like a Xander or now a Will Zalatoris who just play better at difficult setups, but it's going to be easier. So we need some birdie ability in there. So my key stats for this week: strokes gained approach, strokes gained off the tee, again with that emphasis on driving accuracy, not that driving accuracy itself is a key stat. Strokes gained putting and birdie or better rate for this week.
I wanted to linger on the putting thing for a second because looking back to last year, so what I do is look at the top 15 golfers in the event and look at where they ranked for the full season of the PGA Tour in different stats and, compare them. So the median rankings for different stats, median rankings for the top 15 last year at TPC River Highlands: driving distance, 114th, accuracy, 92nd, off the tee, 91st, good drives gained, or good drive rate, I guess it would be, 82nd. So good drive rate was the best one there for the driving stats. Approach, 89th, around the green, 94th, strokes gained putting, 32nd, median ranking for the top 15 guys with 32nd for the full year. And it wasn't that extreme in previous years, but you did see a similar thing where it was the good putters who really did shine at this event. So I do think I want to emphasize putting a bit more than usual for this week. I'm used to doing so via a combination of bent grass plus POA. But I think whatever route you want to go for, I would say I'm not like actively targeting great putters, but I am very, very, very nervous of not great putters. So I'm not off Mito Pereira this week at 10-2. I think that's a very appropriate salary for a guy who's been golfing really well right now. It does give me a bit of pause though, knowing that putting is not his strength. So I think that's what I'm viewing things for this week is it's a bigger red flag for me if you're a bad putter than it typically would be. And it's already a red flag for me, but I would say it's a bigger red flag this week. I kind of want you to be at least average or better, capable of having these good events in the greens. I think that's where I'm at with that. Would you agree with that mindset towards it?
Yeah. I think that, we have by now, if anyone's listened to us for like years, they've seen the evolution of how we treat putting. And it used to be something that we would just ignore. Now it's not something that we ignore, and it's actually something that we implement in different ways, for sure. But, this is a sort of week where, you need to have some putting ability. Just gaining tee to green is probably not going to be enough. You're going to have to make some putts. A big reason for that is that Data Golf, they have this course table. I mean, they have something for everything. Probably like everything, but they show that it's really difficult to gain strokes around the green, even from the fairway, especially from the fairway relative to other courses. So you're not necessarily going to be in great position always. So you're going to have to make some putts. And so, yes, strokes gained putting overall is getting more of the emphasis because I'm de-emphasizing approach, which is usually about 35 to 40% of my model. It's around 30% this week.
So that actually is a pretty significant change, honestly.
Yeah. And so a lot of that gets made up with strokes gained off the tee, but also putting for this week. So yeah, it's important this week. If you look at the leaderboard from last year, you'll see why strokes gained putting, the long-term, the full season strokes gained putting numbers were quite strong in terms of their correlation. And if you look at approach, even in tournament, these guys weren't gaining a ton of strokes with approach, but I will never actively target golfers who will consistently and horrifically lose strokes with their irons because it's not a good recipe.
Correct. So we're making tweaks. We're not totally tossing things out, I think, but still 40 to 45% down to 30% is a noticeable change with regards to emphasis on approach. Let's dig into past history and talk about a guy who has been tremendous from a putting perspective recently. That is Patrick Cantley. Cantley is in the upper range. He checks in at $11,600 for this week. He is shortened. He was 16-1, now 14-1, which is noteworthy. So what do you see with Cantley, specifically looking at his history here at TPC River Highlands?
Why is it always the golfers I like most shorten before I get to talk about them throughout the week?
I think it's because
I know why it is.
There are market movers, and I'm not saying that's you, but I'm saying that not to throw shots, but it may be your brain. They found a way to tap in. The government's always in our brains. It's math. It's math.
Okay.
We're going fully unhinged here.
Yeah, I can tell. Usually we reserve those for whenever the field is highlighted by a Brendan Steele, but we don't have that. We have a pretty good top of the field this week, starting in this context in terms of past history. Should be probably Rory in terms of the best past history, but I'm going to start with Patrick Cantley. Cantley, someone I faded last week. Just again, kind of dug deeper into the splits on difficult courses and easy courses, and he plays better whenever you need to just make a bunch of birdies. He still finished T14. He improved his score by a shot each round, which definitely not easy to do with how the scoring conditions toughened up throughout that event. But he has finished top 15 here the past 4 years with none of those inside the top 10. But I mean, let's not overreact there. I'll take 4 straight top 15s. Just because none of them were top 10s doesn't mean that things are not good. Cantley also gained in tee to green in all 4 of those, and specifically, I mean, he gained in off the tee approach and around the green in all 4 of those years. So really good. If you visualize a grid, all 12 of those boxes are pluses, which is pretty sick to see. Jim seems confused, or he's just.
I'm trying to visualize it. No, I'm trying to visualize it myself, and I'm having a tough time. I'll be honest.
Jim, you've seen billions of golf vlogs by now where it lists out off the tee approach.
Oh yeah, I'm in
around
it now.
The green.
I can
putting,
visualize it.
And so yeah, if you make that grid, all those would be pluses.
I mean, yeah, but you did omit the putting part. You did cherry pick. You did Cantley pick.
We better, I don't know. let's keep it professional on this.
Keep it implies it was there to begin with.
Yeah. So Cantley, again, as I mentioned, got up to T14 at the U.S. Open. He was third at Memorial, missed the cut at the PGA, won the Zurich with Xander, and was second at RBC Heritage. The majors haven't been particularly great. Again, T14 at the U.S. Open, cut at the PGA, T39 at the Masters. And I think that is enough to sort of, at least as I was assuming, get people a little bit lower on Cantley despite having good form at this course. I thought maybe they look at, keep in mind the majors, look at the top of the field and say Cantley's not really that guy. Was just T14 last week. I think that if he played a little bit worse last week, those odds wouldn't have moved. But honestly, I think this is a great week for Cantley. He is not going to be as mentally fatigued unless he really did feel like he was grinding it out. But with Rory and Scheffler at the top of the leaderboard last week, I think that if you're going to nitpick and say hey, that this player is going to be, it's going to be a hard test to go from the U.S. Open and stay mentally engaged. I would say Scheffler and Rory are probably more at risk than Cantley. So what I'm getting at is Cantley is one of my favorite plays of the week. I think he's a great bet. Even at 14-1, there's still value there in my model. So that's where I am with Cantley.
Yeah, I think that you were talking about some guys who may do better in easier setups. Cantley is struggling at majors has been a thing for a long time. I tend to use him in majors, so maybe it's a me problem. But I think that maybe it's not a surprise that he was fine, but not great there. And like you said, the form beyond that's very good. Cantley is a tremendous putter, at least recently on Bentgrass and POA. I think that's a plus for him too. So I have no objections. I do think that it is a little bit tough to use him over Rory if you're not considering the mental side of things, with Rory having played a bunch of events in a row, which we'll talk about later on, with the fact that he was competing in the US Open, stuff like that. And maybe the PO'd Rory angle is a bit less lessened at a lower or a not as high profile event. So I think in a vacuum, it's tough to get him over Rory, but I think if you consider that the anecdotal stuff, which you can definitely do so, then it's a bit different discussion. So I think Cantley definitely does a great at well for this week. Let's talk about Mark Leishman coming off 14th at the U.S. Open, and he is a former winner at this course. That win came back in 2012, 10-year anniversary. There you go, 10-year anniversary with win narrative. Got it. But more recently, Leishman finished third here last year. He was 21st in 2019. The good finish last year was in large part due to the putter, but Leishman's done that pretty often here. He has gained at least 3 strokes putting in 3 out of 10 trips to TPC River Highlands. Leishman, not all that accurate off the tee. He's not a birdie machine, but he does have the course history, does have the putting. Does that do enough to draw you in here at 10-3?
It's doing enough to draw some people. We've seen his win odds shift from 55 to 46. Sorry if you said that.
Did not.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. He was someone I looked at a little bit longer than normal, and I didn't quite get there. Not very accurate off the tee, which is something that I do care about. Although, to be fair, I like Jordan Spieth this week, so
sure.
Kind of nitpicking there. But, the irons, the ball striking is fine. The short game is fine. I think he's a little bit not really oversalaried, but he doesn't do enough to stand out relative to other golfers there. I know he's good on bent and POA, but doing a lot of damage with the putter. He can get hot with the putter, not quite so much over the past year with the tee to green. So probably not there myself. I'd rather go with Mito at 10-2 or Aaron Wise at 10-4.
Or potentially maybe Brian Harmon in that exact same range, who you're talking about next. Harmon is checking in this week at $10,100. Harmon, not an elite putter by any means, but better than he has been previously. So what do you see with Harmon specifically here at this course in the past?
Yeah, so I would say Harmon drew my attention. He tends to show up at the U.S. Open. It feels like I think his form's actually a lot better than than that statement probably even gives him credit for. But started off 68, 69, and then finished 75, 76 on the weekend. But, a T43 from Brian Harmon, still a pretty stellar result in those conditions, IMO. And he's been good, of course, at TPC River Highlands, which is why we're talking about him. Since 2015, 3rd missed cut, 35th, 6th, 8th missed cut, and 5th. So 4 top 10s in that span. He does putt well here, but the overall game is solid, and it makes sense. I like when things make sense, Jim. And I think this one makes sense because he can stay relevant off the tee due to his accuracy over the past 50 rounds. I have him in the 86th percentile in fairways gained. You like to see that. Mm-hmm. He has 2 top 20s in his past 5 starts on tour, 2 made cuts at majors in this span. Thoughts on Brian Harmon in a fairly loaded low 10,000 range, but an overall substantial drop off from, let's say, let's just call it 11,000. Like the 10,000 range, there's a big drop off there. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on Harmon and maybe this range in general?
That's the biggest thing for me, is that this range is not, I don't know. It's tough to justify going here when I can instead find a bit extra to get up to Xander at 11.3, stuff like that. That's tougher for me. Harmon specifically, it depends on how much you adjust for course fit, because he should be a really good course fit due to the accuracy that you mentioned, the fact that his irons have not been elite recently, but the short game is good, solid putting, specifically at this, at this course, he's been pretty good. So the fit is pretty good for Harmon, but is that enough to overcome the fact that I probably don't want to be in this range a ton, and he's not my favorite guy within it? I talked about Mito and not liking his putting. I still feel like I'd rather ride with Mito and hope that he's not terrible as a putter. He's just not good. I feel like I'd rather go with Mito if I'm in this range, but I'd rather just avoid this range altogether, which means that my exposure to golfers in this range will naturally be lower. And I'd rather concentrate that on one guy versus spreading things out. That's probably where I wind up on this tier personally.
So do you let's talk, I think I had penciled in somewhere else, roster construction. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk Jason Day at 98, huh?
Yeah.
Talk to me about Jason Day, and then we'll talk roster construction, because I think it's going to be the real conversation piece for this week.
Yeah, so Day is 98, which means he is a little bit lower than Leishman, a little bit lower than Harmon and guys like that, but still not cheap. But we haven't done the Jason Day check-in in a while, but TPC River Highlands has been pretty good to him, even recently when the form has been off. Day has played here 5 straight years. He missed the cut back in 2017, but since then he has gone 12th, 8th, 46th, and 10th. The good finishes were via a blend of his typical short game stuff, but also some decent weeks ball striking. And Day's approach play has been horrible recently, but he's still made 4 straight cuts in individual play events, and the short game has been really, really good. Day's salary is $9,800. We're downplaying approach a bit this week. Still very important. We're downplaying it a bit. Is there enough here for you to take a bite on Day at $9,800?
I think there are too many other names in this range for me to have interest in Jason Day, who is doing literally everything with the short game. Yeah. So around the green and putting. The irons, as you mentioned, not good, and actively aggressively sort of bad. That's just not a recipe that I like. As I mentioned before, it's fine to downplay or de-emphasize iron play a little bit, but you're asking a tall order to lose strokes with approach. Mm-hmm. Honestly, now that I think about it, I can't imagine that there's ever been a golfer who's won an event losing strokes with approach.
That happened earlier this year. I'm pretty sure it did. I thought I remember seeing it in someone's log.
I could check.
It probably was not adjusted for field strength, if I had to guess.
But, sure. I think I do remember that. But what I was kind of getting at is you can be just okay with the putter, but to and I'm not saying Jason Day is going to lose strokes with approach, for sure. He's trending that way. But you're asking for perfection from everything else in order to win. And at 9,800, even in a field like this, I want my guys down there. I want to feel like they can win.
Yeah.
If you factor in Jason Day's proneness to withdraw, the iron play being bad, his being carried, and like one of the things that I've started to talk about more is like with my expected putting stuff. If you putt better than baseline and you're putting really well, and like Jason Day's putting really well, he's got a great short game right now. That improves your finishes, and your finishes just naturally increase your DFS salary, your win odds. It's a bad time to buy in, so I'm out on Jason Day. If he's up in contention, I'll root for him because I always do. But for me personally, Jim, I'm out.
Yeah, I think there are better guys in that range, which is what you said initially at the top. It's like that's not a barren range. And again, I'm more open to the high 9,000 range than the low 10,000 range, outside of like maybe a Seamus Power or Aaron Wise or something like that. Like I think they're viable, but like I like them more than Leishman, more than Harmon, to save that bit of salary there. And in this high 9,000 range, you kind of don't hate Denny McCarthy. I kind of don't hate Keith Mitchell because, of course, if you're going to target Keith Mitchell, do it at a short course. You know, when else would you want to go at him? I think it's not the worst range, and I think there are guys I like more. So I think that's my key hangup with him. And again, I feel like I'd rather just dip down to the low 9,000 range because is the skill gap between the high 9,000 range and the low 9,000 range that big? Probably not, honestly. Like, would you take Maverick McNeely or Jason Day straight up?
McNeely.
Yeah. And McNeely's 9.4. So I think that's where I'm at. I just don't think there's a big enough gap there.
I think the real question is, it's not necessarily McNeely or Day. Is it any of them? Or is it like 3 studs and 3 values?
Define stud.
Realistically, if my value plays are like 89 and like 89 to like 9.2, that's a value to me on FanDuel. I'm not talking like 7,000. Then stud in that sense is like around 10.5 and up.
Okay. So I think I want 2 guys at 11.3 or higher in pretty much every lineup. I think there's a pretty big fall off after Xander at 11.3. Like, you know, Neiman, Im, guys like that, they're fine. But like, I do think there's a fall off there. I think that I want 2 at 11.3 or higher. And then if I can get back up to a guy in the mid 10,000 range, I would like that, which to me says I'm probably not going to be in this mid range very much, I think is what you were getting at, correct?
Yeah. It's, you might rotate in a few guys here and there, but it's not a week where I'm building around balanced lineups.
Right.
We have, let's say, Sungjae Im and up, because I'm fine with any of those guys. If there was a stipulation, like we'd build a head-to-head, and it's like you have to use one of those guys, that's still 10 golfers that I'd be fine using.
Yeah.
That's 10 golfers who I think realistically have a substantial chance to win, and my model shows that. My model does like the favorites a good bit this week, more than the odds themselves. So about a 53% chance that one of those top 10 guys in salary does win. I like that.
I actually do want to loosen it a bit. I agree with you. Sungjae and Neiman both are good enough. So not 11.3 is the floor for my second guy, but I think 11,000 would be where I'd set the floor for the second guy and then figuring it out from there. So let's talk about the studs, because you mentioned your model actually does like the studs this week. And let's talk about Rory McIlroy as we shift our focus towards current form, because Rory McIlroy's current form is very good, but it's also voluminous. And I think if you're picking nits, that's the first thing you bring up with Rory. So what are you seeing with him in all of this course history, this recent history we have to analyze here?
Yeah, so like we could have talked about him in event history. He's finished 17th, 12th, and 11th in 3 starts. Dominant stats off the tee and around the green for him. But the recent Rory I thought was more interesting because I'm the worst podcaster. I have in my notes that the recent Rory is more fascinating, and then I was going to follow up and say fascinating because yes, while he has gained an average of 3.15 true strokes gained over the past 20 rounds, according to Data Golf, which is 0.79 shots better per round than anyone else. We at a certain point have to talk about the other stuff surrounding Rory. So I had a very specific word choice I wanted to use and didn't do it because I was trying to be just more natural and off the cuff. And this is why we're not a good podcast overall. But
whoa, this is not a we situation here. Come on, we can't use the we everywhere. Rude.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe
on the line.
Maybe if this was an I situation from your standpoint, we would have a better win rate on our nominations. But I guess probably
this year.
Yeah, but like a lot of nominations and
hey, we won twice. Nothing else matters. 2 chips, we're good.
Yeah, we're like Colin Morikawa.
Okay, that's fair. I'll take that for now. We'll check back on me later on in the week, please.
Yeah. But Rory won the RBC Canadian Open amid the coincidentally the Live Golf opener drama, and then he showed up and
just kidding. Morikawa literally just tweeted that he's staying on the PGA Tour.
We are just like Colin Morikawa.
We are all in. Colin Morikawa Bunga sticking around.
Yes.
It's not that I was checking Twitter while you were talking. I would never do that.
I wouldn't think you would. Yeah. But
you wouldn't check Twitter while I'm talking or not talking, so I gotta balance it out.
I wouldn't check Twitter. But T5 at the US Open with one of the we want to talk about heartbreak for Will Zalatoris. Rory hacking it out of the long grass was heartbreaking earlier in the week.
It was pretty funny though. Like I love Rory and I root for him and I wanted to do well, but I still chuckled.
I think that was depressing. What I found, the thing I always think of that's most funny with Rory is when he holed out at the Masters and did like the weird arm thing, like he didn't know what to do with his arms because he was like down in the bunker and like threw his club and just did like an airplane thing. I don't know. That's hilarious. We didn't see that this week. We saw him lose a lot of shots around the green because he spent a lot of time around the green because he couldn't get it out of the grass. But
he still finished 5th.
Yeah. So but that's a grind. That's got to be a grind.
Yeah.
He's got the win. He's got basically the weight of the PGA Tour on his shoulders. I'm not saying it's all on Rory, but like a lot of it is on Rory. He is on like the whatever committee. I don't know. I only know so much, but he's on like the players committee of the PGA Tour and everything. So yes, if you talk to me about Rory versus Cantley straight up statistically, nothing else going on. Rory's got some time to rest. I'd say Rory absolutely, but at a certain point, like he's got to have a disappointing showing, right? Or is this just we think he goes on forever?
It's tough because like I think it's weird because like he hasn't cracked yet. Like maybe you could say that some of that frustration at the US Open was cracking, but like he still rebounded. Like I think that showed a lot of like mental toughness that he like bounced back from a frustrating day and even a frustrating hole, and he golfed well. He still, I think he saved par on that, didn't he? Like on that hole?
No. He made like a 25 footer to save double bogey. It could have been worse.
Yeah. So like that's pretty impressive. So I feel like it depends on I hate this answer, but like it does depend on where people are at on him in terms of like projected roster rate. Because what it does, it increases the variance. It increases the odds that things don't go well. If people over account for that, then I could see buying into him. I'm not sure if they will, because like what percentage of the typical like the listeners know this, but like what percentage of the typical PGA DFS player knows Rory has played 4 consecutive weeks, and that might be a downside. Probably not like everyone. So my guess is that it's not accounted for enough, and that's why my assumption would be that I'd probably maybe need to look elsewhere. I still like him a lot. So I'm probably still going to go there, but it does leave open the possibility to potentially deviating.
Yeah. So early returns from Fanshare Sports indicate Patrick Cantley will be Patrick Chalkley this week.
So the field Cantley off Cantley.
Correct. I'm actually, what is this, 5 years into this show? I'm surprised it's the first time you've ever used that joke.
Is it only 5 years? Gosh,
I don't know. It's been a while. I can't remember how long FanDuel's had
Hmm.
PGA. Well, but Rory's like in that second tier. I don't think he's going to go overshadowed, overlooked, but maybe if Cantley does run away with it, then, maybe I would rather prefer from a tournament standpoint, a fatigued potentially Rory than a chalky Patrick Cantley. So
Right.
it's always tough because like so much of PGA DFS strategy comes down to what type of game are you playing? Are you playing a head to head?
Yeah.
Which in that case, I think that Patrick Cantley's floor is high enough just to trust him and maybe not expect him to sort of phone it in. But from a tournament standpoint, if he's very, very popular because everyone's looking at the course history, his betting odds shorten, then I would I'm okay
Well, why is it just
on Rory?
Cantley versus McElroy? Why isn't JT in this discussion? Because he wasn't super in contention at the U.S. Open. Sam Burns, very good putter. That could be enticing. He also is not, similar to JT, not super up there. Why are we not including them in this discussion as well?
Because at the top of the field, this feels a little bit like a major in the sense of there are a lot of options. And I'm sure I could have pretended to say this about anything, but like last week, I noticed that Collin Morikawa had really low roster rate projections, and I almost, went heavy on Morikawa, and I talked myself out of it because of the short game.
Right.
And Morikawa was someone I didn't have interest in, and I didn't just want to play him due to some leverage. But I think Sam Burns is a great call. Like it's not a bad week for Sam Burns ever.
Yeah.
Like he's that good. So
okay. Might be them. It might be on them in terms of tournaments. I might consider that as well. Let's talk about Denny McCarthy. I talked about how I might be into him this week, and let's justify that take. Putting may matter a bit more this week with irons not being as crucial, that's a Denny McCarthy event if I've ever heard one. And he's also been getting good finishes even recently with his flaws. McCarthy 7th at the U.S. Open. That's a second straight top 10. He was 5th at the Memorial before that. And some of that was actually due to his approach. He was plus at the U.S. Open, and he actually gained 2.1 in approach at the Memorial. He also gained 3.1 in approach at the Valero back in April. The putting, as always, is lights out, and you don't need to be long here to compete. So what is your read on Denny McCarthy at $9,700?
I like McCarthy a good bit. The question is, does he do enough to make me think he can win this week? Not totally. Does he do enough to get me salary to golfers who I think can win this week? Not really. So I think from that standpoint, like I'd rather save more salary and go down to someone who's more of like a course fit, like a Brendon Todd. Not that McCarthy's not, but like
if I'm talking about Brendon Todd, don't you wait? Don't you think we'll look over him?
I'm going for like just give me a guy who's a course fit and saves me some salary so that I can actually roster the winner. Todd, Kisner. What's Russell Knox been up to? He hits every fairway. He can't putt, but
that's a slight concern.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if he's the right answer for me this week.
Okay.
He's the answer if I was trying to do like a Jeopardy thing, but I got myself tongue twisted. And if you're saying one of the favorites doesn't win, then you go more balanced. But I feel like it's even with scores going lower, and accuracy being important, that puts the more volatility into this. I feel like one of those top 15 or so is gonna win this week.
Yeah, I think McCarthy is someone where if I wind up at 9-7 left in my final slot and I don't want to renegotiate the value plays and stuff like that, fine, I can live with him. That's okay. I don't want to prioritize him, but again, if I wind up at 9-7 for whatever reason, I don't want to shift off any value plays, stuff like that, I could see using him, but that's kind of the one situation. Let's talk here about Davis Reilly at 10-6 because I do want to get back up into this mid 10,000 range for my third golfer after I get to two guys above 11-3, which I can do. I've been tinkering with it recently, and I think I can make that work. One of the guys in consideration there could be Davis Reilly, who is red hot right now, What do you see with Reilly? Can he keep this up? And should we go to him this week at 10-6?
Yeah, so I mean, we talked for like a minute or two about roster rates at the top and saying Patrick Cantley's chalky, but like all it really takes sometimes with a DFS lineup in tournaments is to roster someone who's going to be pretty unpopular, and then if you multiply those together, like it's very likely that you're going to have a more unique lineup. And while Davis Reilly is golfing really well, the salary of 10-6 leads me to believe that he won't be on a ton of rosters, especially with bigger name value above and below him. But, overall, I think not the low 10,000 range, but like the upper to mid 10,000 range could get overlooked as a whole. But I mean, since the Mexico Open, Reilly's finished 5th, 9th, 13th, 4th, 13th, and 31st. Those 2 13ths came at the PGA Championship and the Memorial. Good events there. T31 at the US Open. He gained an approach in the past 5 events while having... I rushed this note, but it says whale having a good but not elite short game. So, like a real pro, I called attention to it.
Yeah, naturally.
So, but again, I did some research on stabilization rates with approach play. 5 events gaining is more than enough to believe that there's a bit of a trend here. So great recipe overall for someone who's golfing well, finishing well, and doing it with ball striking. He hasn't played here in the past, but definitely not someone we should overlook or write off because of the salary. It's more a question of, does he do enough to stand out, and are we ever going to be in this salary range this week?
To the last question, yes. I will be in this range for sure. I would like to be here because I think there's like a second fall off after probably Mito or Harmon, honestly. Like I think the first fall off is after Sungjae or whoever the other guy is in the 11,000 range. Neiman. Sungjae or Neiman, I think there's a fall off there. I think there's a second fall off probably occurring after Harmon or so at 10-1. So I'd like to be here, but I don't know if I'll use Reilly over like guys here who, I mean, Reilly makes birdies too, but I like Seamus Power. He's a pretty good birdie maker. I do like Mito at 10-2, so I'd probably go him above Reilly as well. Aaron Wise, not a good putter, and that's pretty concerning, but I might go there too. So I think that to me, Power, Wise, and Pereira are probably all above Reilly for me personally. Am I wrong in that? Where are you at with them?
It's close. I would probably say it's like Mito and Wise in the top of that tier. Power and Reilly at the bottom.
Wow. Rude. Do you want a Seamus versus someone bet?
Well, by your rules, I have to take a salary discount.
No. I just pointed out when I take one. Doesn't mean you have to take one.
I mean, I have Power is quite good long term. That's why I've lost a lot of bankroll on Seamus Power. Same. Would you do Keegan? 10-8?
No, I like Keegan.
Okay.
I'm not going to use him, but
would you do Aaron Wise?
Probably. I like Aaron Wise too, but I feel like just for the funsies of it, I'd do it.
Yeah. I mean, I never win these head-to-heads anyway, and you're creeping up on me in our bobble hat, so.
You just said that to jinx me. It's very rude.
No, it's just reminiscent of last year when I blew like a...
I mean, you've got an insurmountable lead in win picks, so... I was glad that I blocked you in Zalatoris last week, though, because I would have been sweating real hard had I not done that, because that probably would have been the nail in my coffin, unless I hit a super long shot, which I don't like betting anyway. So, yeah, I'll do Wise versus Power, but I do like Wise as well. I just think that Seamus is a bit steadier. So,
all right.
Okay, you mentioned Brendon Todd as being a course hit for this week. He's 9,000. I think that I'll be in this range a lot, so let's talk about Todd and see if he does enough to stand out here. A lot of overlap with McCarthy. Todd didn't play the U.S. Open because he's Brendon Todd. But before that, he was 13th at the RBC Canadian Open. He was 3rd at the Charles Schwab Challenge. The approach play was actually pretty good in both those and has generally been getting better since the start of the swing season. Todd now ranks 18th in good drives gained, 67th in approach, 7th in bentgrass plus POA putting across the past 50 rounds. Not a big birdie guy, but that may not be as big of an issue this week where his lack of distance is less penal. So are you willing to roster Brendon Todd this week at $9,000?
Yeah, I'm not a big bird guy either. I prefer Elmo myself, but
that's pretty good. Okay. That makes up for all the bad ones earlier. You finally did well.
Yeah, I love Brendon Todd this
You're
week.
shooting like Draymond out here. You're 1 for 10, but the
Don't
one was good.
Don't you put
the one
that
was
on
good.
Me. Don't you put that on me.
I had to. Sorry, 4-time world champion Draymond. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah. How many Steph got? So Brendon Todd, we have to pick and choose where we roster Brendon Todd, and this is the type of course where we can. Hyper accurate, elite putter. I'm in on him at 9,000. I'm really trying to build lineups where I have like 3 golfers right around 9,000 or a little bit lower, and then trying to avoid like the middle of the field in general.
Yep. That's where I'm at as well. And Todd will be part of that for sure. Potentially my bobblehead against you. We'll see. I think that he's in that consideration set, I would say, for that type of format. Okay, bookmaker odds for this week. Scotty Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, and Justin Thomas are the co-favorites right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. They are all 11-1. Patrick Cantley is on an island at 14-1. Sam Burns is the next up at 19-1, followed by Xander Schauffele at 21-1. Jordan Spieth is 22-1. Then there's another tier drop down to Sung Jae at 32-1. Tony Finau and Keegan Bradley are 34-1, and Joaquin Niemann rounds out the top group at 35-1. So I talked about this before. I think there's a pretty big fall off after Spieth. So I want to hear your final thoughts on this. How are you viewing things in terms of your third golfer for this week? So we talked about the top 2. Where do you view your third golfer as being the ideal spot for this week?
Yeah, so that just depends on whether you are willing to stick to the top like 10 golfers and say that they're going to win. And I think that that's how I'm playing it. Of course, that's still a coin flip versus the field. And that's one thing that's always important to keep in mind is like, we're going to have value golfers in the mix, but you're looking at 1 or 2 or 3 out of like 100. So it's never really part of my process this week. So for me, again, I'm looking at, and I'll just name names to make it easy.
Yeah.
Like Brendon Todd, Harris English, I think is very interesting. I'll talk more about him in a bit. And then a few more guys like in the 8,000 range to get 3 of them, and then getting back up to at least, I don't know if I can quite do 11,000 unless I go with a true value in Austin Smotherman at 78. But
yeah,
I'm looking at basically having, like a Davis Reilly in there just to make me be able to get up to 11K plus for 2 golfers. Like you said, probably want 2 golfers in that range.
Yeah.
If I liked more golfers in the 7,800 or like low 8,000 range, I could probably say I'll just get 3 in every lineup. But if it's just one golfer who stands out to me, I can't say that's going to be like my core play.
Yeah.
But I might consider doing that in our head-to-head, honestly.
I think I am too, just because I think I need more. I need 3 solid guys, and that's the best route for doing so. So I think that I'd probably be doing that as well. Which golfers' odds have moved most notably since things opened yesterday at FanDuel Sportsbook?
Yeah, so some of these might be recent because I did this about 20 minutes before we started the show, and then you mentioned that Cantley shortened, and then I pulled it again, and it looks like a few others have shortened in that span too, but maybe it was just user error on my part. But Cantley 16-1 to 14-1. Sung Jae Im 36-32. Keegan Bradley 41 to 34. Davis Reilly 48 to 36. Mark Leishman and Mito Pereira 55 to 46. Brian Harmon 55 to 50. Danny McCarthy 75 to 55. Brendan Steele 70 to 65, and Mackenzie Hughes 100 to 90.
McCarthy ads are out there, man. They're betting him.
Mm-hmm.
Big buzz happening. You said Denny McCarthy couldn't win. Someone else begs to differ. Which golfers have odds that are long or okay? We're gonna compose ourselves here.
Well, hey,
Which lower salary golfers have odds that stand out to you?
Perfect. We'll fix it in post. We're not live or anything.
No, definitely not. What's up, YouTube?
Brendan Steele, 65. He's 9,500 on FanDuel, at least worth shouting out. Christian Bezaden-Hout, good short game, 75-1 at 95 as well. Then we have Maverick McNeely at 80-1, Mackenzie Hughes, Cam Tringale, Kyung-Hoon Lee, and Cameron Davis at 90-1, and then a big cluster at 100-1 that includes Brendon Todd, Russell Knox, Kevin Streelman, Harris English, Aaron Rye, Jonathan Vegas, Kevin Kisner, and Stuart Sink. But
Mackenzie Hughes is one of the guys with a good short game. He's 91. Is he in your consideration set for this week or no?
No.
Okay.
Like, I want short game and accuracy, but I think Hughes isn't even that accurate.
No, he's not.
He's
also not that great at the approach. Like, he's just it's all short game.
Yeah. But one thing I'll point out is, like, almost all those golfers that I just named, which was a lot of them, there's Kevin Streelman and Harris English are below 9,000. It's not a week where you're going to get like multiple golfers at 75 or 65-1 in the 8,000 range, because a lot of the win equity just belongs up top. And that's basically the greatest summation as to why I can say I don't really care about the upper 9,000 or even, well, I'll say upper 9,000 range, because the win equity is about the same for those guys as it is for like the low 9,000 range. So I don't really feel the need to get up to that tier very often.
I agree with that sentiment. And we'll be acting accordingly for this week. Weather for this week, there's a chance of rain throughout the entire day Thursday, around 25 to 50% odds, but it's for every single wave. And the wind is also stagnant. So I don't think there's a true need to go with like a waves type approach, or there's no advantage to other times. Maybe you do bump up one or the other as a result of just the fact there is weather in play, but not sure you'll be able to predict which one benefits there. The wind increases during the day Friday, but never gets higher than 8 miles per hour. So we're fine there. The weekend looks good too. So we should be good to play things pretty straight up. With that said, let's dive into our player picks here for the Travelers Championship. Brandon, who stands out to you in the upper tier on FanDuel.com?
Patrick Cantley, still going to be a golfer who I think fits the process. The only reason I would back off of this is if he becomes like super chalky. So if you start to hear Cantley's name everywhere, see his face everywhere, then I think you're very fine to pivot. Even to someone,
we were trying to pick out the most handsome golfers last week. I didn't include Cantley, but like, he's not bad. Like, it's it's not a bad face.
If we're building a lineup like based on
handsome stack,
among the top, I'm going like a Sam Burns in that salary tier.
I think it's Xander.
Well, sure. I mean, I'm just
saying.
We'll get okay. You can give your.
Sorry, I knocked on the table and the dog is mad now. So sorry. We're just all over the place today.
Well, anyway. if it's not clear why I like Cantley so far, it's a lot of things. He's got good recent form as always. I mean, he's just a great golfer and is always a favorite of my win simulation model because he's so good consistently. Very good event form with those 4 straight top 15s. Plays better at courses that you need to score lower on. Not necessarily the guy who like nukes the driver. No, it's not to say he's super accurate, but because you don't have to be super long, he's not going to lose as many strokes from that standpoint off the tee. So I think a lot sets up well for Cantley, who's a really good long-term putter, probably putting a little bit too hot, but still expected to be one of the best putters on tour anyway.
Yeah, I think that Cantley is a good option. I will probably not be as high on him, though, just because I think I like these other guys a bit more. Now, I had Rory as being my high salary guy initially. The more I think about it, the more I feel like I should have either Sam Burns or Justin Thomas in this slot, depending on who projects to be lower rostered for this week. Because both these guys, I think, are fascinating in terms of what they can do. JT putting a lot better recently than he has over a long term. Sam Burns, a tremendous putter. Burns, not the most accurate guy off the tee. It's not necessarily like JT's strength either. But I do think that maybe we overplay that a bit and they wind up going a bit overlooked. So I think for our head-to-head, I'm pretty likely to wind up on Rory, but like I'm not opposed to pivoting to a JT or a Burns, depending on where the winds blow in terms of roster rate for this week. If I had a preference, I go JT. I think JT would be the guy I'd pivot to, but Burns, I think it's still very, very interesting. He could also be my second guy in the lineup at 11-5. I could make that work too, but I think they're both pretty interesting. Rory probably for the more, straight up situations, but JT, Burns, very, very interesting to me. Who else do you like here in this upper range on FanDuel?
I like Jordan Spieth. The more that we talk about this, and one thing that, we do our research leading into the show, and then we spend an hour staring at everything and thinking about different angles. Like, it's going to be a week where you can build different lineups because not everyone at the top is going to be chalky. A few guys will, and then you can just play some other options from there. But Jordan Spieth, if he's not going to be popular, because he does have a win here, I get that. But following that up, 3 not very promising results at this course. But it really just coincides with like his career drop off after 2017. So I'm not that concerned about like course form. That's also one of the issues with course form overall is getting one swipe at a guy throughout a year. And if you're not looking at like the context around what he was doing, then it can be very irrelevant. But T37 at the US Open last week. So played well, but wasn't necessarily like grinding out win position really. So I'm fine with that. The one issue I have is that he's definitely not accurate off the tee. And if he just can't keep it on the planet, then he's not going to be a very good pick this week. But if he can club down and hit some of these fairways, because this is just a shorter course overall, he's in a really good position because he's still gaining strokes off the tee, 90th percentile in my data. And if you look at, and I know Jim's never seen this before, but if you look at a golfer and his event by event log, you'll see a lot of ups and downs with Spieth's putter. It's something that we've talked about indirectly and also directly here. But like, if you look at when he's losing a lot of strokes putting, those are almost all on Bermuda. This is not a Bermuda course. This is bent grass and POA. That's where his better putting weeks have come. I think that's a fun angle for this week. So I hope that Spieth comes in a little bit under the radar because he's still got that high end upside. And at 11-4, he is someone who I think really fits what I'm looking for this week.
Yeah, I think that Spieth is interesting at 11-4. Totally okay with considering him, but I kind of prefer Xander Schauffele at 11-3, just beneath Jordan Spieth. Xander's more of a grinder. He is a guy we tend to bump up on like tougher courses, and we do want birdies here, but I think he should fit the course pretty well. Xander ranks 10th in good drives gained, 5th in approach, and 11th in bent grass plus POA putting across the past 50 rounds per Fantasy National. Helps him hit 6th in birdies or better gain in that time. Xander's finished inside the top 20 in all 5 events since he and Patrick Cantley won the Zurich. Xander ranks 5th in true strokes gained across the past 6 months. So I think at 11-3, he's really fun. And honestly, of the studs, he may be the guy I'm most committed to in our head-to-head. I think, like, if I need some salary savings, I can drop down from Rory to JT or drop down from Rory to Cantley or Burns. I might be more committed to Xander at 11-3. So you're the Xander whisperer. What are your thoughts on him this week?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably too low on him. I actually have him as the best iron player long-term when you adjust for field strength and recency. One thing that always kind of gets Xander is like raw data where he's really only plays like these tougher events. And so his numbers don't look quite as good, but if you would make adjustments, like quite good there. And one of the reasons I like Xander at almost any setup, and I can talk myself into Xander anytime I want, is because he does everything well. Mm-hmm. He is a good birdie maker, even though he says he doesn't really prefer the birdie fest. So I have nothing bad to say about Xander. I'm probably too low on him, but I think it's also at a certain point, I try not to talk about Xander every single week.
I've taken up that mantle. I think I talked to him last week too. Let's move to the mid-range. Who stands out to you there?
I have Brian Harmon 10-1, but it works this week because it's a pretty deep to like 10K plus range. A lot of names there. So Harmon's not necessarily like 12th in salary or anything like that. Really good course history. Good start at the US Open again before sort of trailing off. And, I'm not going to go over the finishes because we already mentioned those, but just makes sense, right, as a course fit. And I really, really like whenever the data backs up like why someone plays well at a course, because then it makes sense and you can trust it more. And just one of the best long-term putters in the field.
Yeah, Brian Harmon is a course fit. Keith Mitchell is not. So let's talk about Keith Mitchell too as being a player pick for me this week. More of a bomber than a fairway hitter, but not necessarily inaccurate. And I think that he's undersalaried at $9,700. Mitchell ranks 63rd in good drives gained. That is despite ranking 72nd in approach, which can buoy those numbers a bit, the good drives gained numbers. Mitchell ranks 14th in birdies or better gained, 34th in bentgrass plus POA putting. That's a pretty good combo for this week. Mitchell has not taken advantage of that at this course in the past. He's missed a cut in 2 of the 3 tries of the Travelers, which maybe says, hey, don't use him here. But his form is pretty good now. So I'm actually okay giving him a look in the mid-range, despite the fact he does not get a bump up due to the course. Brandon, what are your thoughts on Keith Mitchell at 97 for this week?
I think you're underselling the course fit. I think things look pretty good. He's about average in accuracy in terms of this field. The main question is the iron play long term. That's kind of what gets me a little bit off of him. But he should still gain stroke. He should gain strokes off the tee, which is vital.
Okay, who else do you like here in the mid range?
Our first overlap, it looks like Mav McNeely.
All right.
If you combine bentgrass and POA putting, he's quite good. 93rd percentile in this field over the past 50 rounds on those surfaces. Very, very good long-term putter expectations because of the putting distance splits. And he makes birdies.
I also have McNeely for, as you mentioned, pretty much the same reasons. McNeely, a bit inconsistent, but a lot of juice to him still. The ball striking's been kind of spotty, but 12th in bentgrass plus POA putting the past 50 rounds, 12th in birdies or better gain the past 50 rounds. Not super accurate, but I think he does enough there to go this way at 94. So my question for you is, would you do a mix stack? A McElroy, McCarthy, McNeely, and then the Greavy and McGirt to fill in the rest? We can't. Is there a MAC? Oh, Mackenzie Hughes. Yeah, you can put Mackenzie Hughes in there too. There you go.
You can do that.
I don't really want to.
I'm not going to do that.
But I think it's in play. McElroy, McCarthy, McNeely. Probably better than the Northwestern stack we tried a couple weeks ago.
You tried it.
Yeah, again, that's a me. You're right. That's an I. You're right. But I think McNeely is the one guy I like in that range. I would say Aaron Rai at 92 is in play for me.
Yes.
I could definitely talk myself into that. See, there anyone else here? Don't hate Tringali. Not.
Have you ever?
I know. I'm not like stumbling over myself to roster him, but I think Tringali's fine. I would just prefer to avoid this range. Jason Kokrak, sneaky good putting numbers recently.
I don't really like this range, but here's 9 names I'm into.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. Let's go to the value plays. Who are you going to there?
So I don't like a lot of the values. Yet I'm going to play a lot of the values this week because
out of necessity.
I think that there's a significant drop off around like 10-4 or so. And there's not a whole lot of separation. So I would rather take a chance on Harris English than some other options. He hadn't played from mid-January to early June. So we got 2 events since then. Missed the cut at Memorial, T61 at the US Open. So definitely not for anyone who's just looking at the results, going to be excited to play Harris English. But he was one of the worst putters in the field last week at the US Open, but gained strokes with his irons and wedges. I think that there's enough because while one event is not necessarily enough to see a trend, we know that Harris English long-term is not an $8,900 golfer in this type of field. So if he's rounding back into form, I like that. And I'd rather just take a chance on that upside.
Would you be worried if he were to track to be popular? Because that injury, I think, does make him pretty volatile. I mean, everyone's volatile in this range. But if he were to track to be, obviously it's not going to be a high roster rate at this salary. Would you deviate if you got the sense that he'd be a bit popular given the amount of variance coming out that injury?
Sure.
Okay.
I don't think it'll be noticed. I don't think it'll be relevant enough to, because again, missed cut T61.
True.
I think people are going to see that and not care.
Fair enough. Okay. My favorite value play is Tom Hoge this week, and I used Hoge last week. It did not go well. He has now missed 3 consecutive cuts. Oh boy, but still willing to buy back in. Part of it is that Hoagie's been it's been different parts of his game that have bit him recently. It's not like one consistent thing that's dragging him down. Last week, it was the irons. Before that, it was his off the tee and wedge play. Then the irons bit him at the Charles Schwab. So he's had different things hurt him. But altogether, Hoge, 16th in good drives gained, 6th in approach, 16th in birdies or better gained the past 50 rounds. I'm okay betting on a bounce back here at $8,800. Where do you settle in on Tom Hoge this week?
Yeah, I still think he's fine. Just abandoned by the irons last week. A lot easier this week than it was last week, though. He's accurate off the tee. He's an other to consider for me this week. Someone that if I had to play, let's say Brendon Todd, Harris English, Tom Hoge to get up to like 3 studs, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think that works too. So I could be on board with that as well. Okay, who else do you like here in the value range?
Brendon Todd. We talked about him already from a course fit standpoint. I think it's just the right type of week for Brendon Todd. Saves you good salary from someone with a similar skill set, but maybe at like a lower level, such as a Denny McCarthy or something like that. So I'm going to have probably too much Brendon Todd. The one other name I really want to shout out is Austin Smotherman at 7,800. If you're okay going down there, 6 straight made cuts, elite ball striker, should be expected for some putting regression. I would say, yes, I can absolutely play 3 studs in every lineup because I have Austin Smotherman. That indicates that I would play Smotherman in every lineup, which I won't, or that there are other golfers in that range that I can pivot to, and there really aren't. So,
yeah, I think that I like that.
Lonto at 84, but that's 600.
Lonto is the guy I'm talking about next. Lonto is 84. And the irons have not been as good recently, and it is a 4-event stretch. So you were talking about stabilization points. 4 events is close-ish, but it's also he missed the cut in one of those. So it's not a huge sample on him struggling there. And the overall sample on Lonto is pretty good. He ranks 20th in approach the past 50 rounds, 20th in birdies or better gain, 20th in bank graphs plus POA putting. Not great off the tee in terms of good drives gain, 86 there, but I don't think he's bad. So I think that my approach this week is I want to find someone in this mid 8,000 range. I think that Lonto is one. I think David Lipsky is another consideration for me, not just because of the Northwestern vibes going across the PGA Tour right now. I looked into Charles Howell III. I'm not totally off of it, but I think what I'll do is I'll probably have one guy in this mid 8,000 range, whether it be Lonto, Lipsky, or Howell, and use them as a way to get back into the mid 10,000 range for that third golfer. Anyone stand out for you between Lipsky, Howell, and Lonto? I think Lonto's my favorite, but anyone stand out for you in that range?
Lonto.
Yeah.
His biggest drawback right now is the wedge play, and that's the least important stat for me this week of the 4. Good on Benton and Poa. I'll take that. Okay.
So that is all that we have here for this week in terms of our player picks. Let's finish up with some win picks based on the odds over at FanDuel.com, where they currently sit. Brandon, who is standing out to you for this week?
It was Cantley at 16. I think it's still going to be Cantley at 14. But I'm for sure going to go Jordan Spieth at 22.
Okay. I'm also going with 2 guys who have relatively short odds. I'm going to go with JT and Xander as my 2 win picks this week. JT's 11-1. It is a bit narrative-y in the sense that he was not super in contention during the U.S. Open. So from a mentality perspective, not as worn down there, but also just a tremendous golfer. So I think that's there. And then Xander, I think, just sets up really well for most courses, potentially a bit undervalued. So I'll go JT and Xander as my win picks this week. You've got Cantley and Spieth. It's a fun group. I can get behind that group for sure. Brandon, any final thoughts for you before we close up shop for today for the Travelers Championship?
From a DFS standpoint, you can definitely pivot all throughout the roster or the salary pool. especially at the top. As far as the win bets go, I know that we picked 4 of the favorites, but I think that it's probably going to be one of the favorites this week. And if not, it's going to be probably someone pretty random.
Yep, most likely. Okay, that is all that we have here for today on the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast. As a reminder, if you have not yet subscribed, please do so wherever you get your podcast. Just search for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, which you always go to, where can they find you there?
At Gadula13, GDULA13.
And I am at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your PGA DFS lineups for the Travelers Championship. We'll talk to you once again next week. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.